Welcome to another episode of Dr. Thor, occultist. One of the most difficult, fascinating, and of course one of the main areas of occultism is of course relationships and love drawing, or in general love matters. This of course is one of the most sought after areas, the most used areas, the most requested areas, and help is basically, of course, the usual relationship problems, money problems, and added into that mix, of course, is health and crossed conditions or curses. I mean, these are pretty much your top areas of need that people are seeking solutions to. And of course, relationships are always pretty much on the top burner with most people, and there's a really difficult and problematical life that we live is how does all this work, and what can magic do in these areas? It's critical to understand that because it's very tough, but it's critical to understand how magic manifests and what it can manifest in general. And we covered this in a booklet to some extent with the hang-on principles. I've covered this with channel understanding. And but it's good to speak in specific areas as well. And all occultism is about building fields around you, basically. And these fields then attract in through channels what you desire. So you create a success field around you, so you're successful. Success, money, generally it all comes together. The same thing with drawing in a particular person, finding someone you can get along with. I don't believe in soulmates. I think people go through stages of life, and I think there are people good for certain stages. I don't believe there are people good for your entire life. But that is a personal opinion, but I think everyone would benefit by changing horses as they go through life and finding somebody that can grow with them and grow to the area they're interested in. And where you are at 20 ain't where you are at 40, ain't where you are at 50. So there's something to be said to the fact that thinking the storybook programmed attitude that you're going to live with the same person consistently and that's the way to go, I think is naive and actually downright stupid. But putting that all aside, like with everything in life, if you try to repair a situation instead of keeping it empowered from the beginning, the difficulties of doing that are enormous. The difficulties and success rate of doing that are low. Broken relationships that want to be tried to be repaired, that have old baggage with them, have a very small success rate ultimately. They rank in the 15 to 20% if you're lucky. And it's important to understand that because there is a large group of people who seem to get fanatically stuck on someone who doesn't love them and doesn't want them, but they masochistically must have this person. And I understand that as teenagers to some extent, you're fascinated, the sexual aspects are kicking in, you're attracted to somebody mostly on a chemical level, where you just want that person, you're drawn to them, they're very attractive to you on every level, you've got to have them. And this happens, I guess, in later life to some extent as well. But as a teenager, you don't really know when to give up because it is not good for you, or it is not going to work, or it is plain and simple not mutual. This apparently seems to go on throughout life with many people who try and change people's personalities. This cannot be done. So the best thing to do, obviously, is when you do love drawings and you try and define these as best as possible so you don't have to deal with too many negative people. But as you draw in and do love drawing, you're going to draw in the frogs as well as the princes. That's just part of life. And the better you are at magic, the less frogs you're going to get in there. But that's part of life. You've got to dismiss people that are not right for you, even though they contact you. So, but when you do love drawing from the beginning, you don't have any old baggage with that person. It's really just finding out whether you're compatible with that person. And those kind of magically empowered actions work very well. And in many cases, you would never meet anybody without magic. Not many, I would say most cases, including in my own life, who had difficulty meeting people until I empowered them magically. Through channels, as I've discussed. But if that wasn't done, I don't think I would have met anybody. So, it's all part and parcel of what has to be done here in terms of the proper way of doing relationship magic, which is very difficult because you're dealing with the most difficult of all things, the human species, which seem to have endless hang-ups, endless problems on every single level. The confused factor of men and women, and the complexity and oddness of female thinking, and the blunt kind of ridiculous level that males think on, are things that don't really gel very well together at all. But as the old cliche goes, can't live with them, can't live without them. But very few people get along. And, it's not only men and women relationships or relationships in general. People don't get along, period. There's constant conflict and bickering within any organization. You get a group of people together, you get 10 people together, and you got 15 different attitudes. So, it's a real problem in general. And, I believe there's a cult problem that creates this, which I won't go into in this particular lecture, but this constant self-centered, self-serving attitude to destruction of even yourself and everyone else is so bizarre and so negative and so unfulfilling to any possible objective you may have that, you have to really wonder what's behind that kind of ridiculousness. But one of the most problematic areas, when people do love drawings to bring in people, I've never failed to see that work. Now, whether they met their ideal person, well, what is the ideal person? And that is a big question to begin with. But, that to some extent I find also is very dependent on the person who doesn't seem to find anybody that meets their criteria, and they're living in some sort of fantasy world of who's going to manifest in front of them. And their ideals of what they're looking for are very unclear and all very fantasy-based of what they think someone's going to provide them. Particularly, it seems, with women. Men are pretty simple. They're looking mostly for sexual contact with the most attractive person they can, and then you go down from there. I don't have any use for men or women in relationships, but men are very simplistic and can be understood pretty easy. It's pretty much the same thing with men. The PPB, as I always say, pizza, porno, and beer. Sitting on a couch is where most men are at, and that's it. Women seem to live in a fantasy world and want to be masochistic and want to draw in the most low-level bad guys they can and then wonder why their life is a mess and seem to get some euphoric thrill over being abused and treated like trash. Numerous good guys are kicked to the curb and thrown in the trash, while one stinking loser after another is embraced and glorified. It reminds me of the day when I was sitting in a bar and a group of women were sitting next to me, and they were talking about how terrible their relationships was, and particularly one girl, how she never could meet anybody. During the course of their stay in the bar, 2 men came up to this girl and wanted to talk with her. Not knowing them, not knowing anything about them. They didn't appear to be anything particularly great or anything particularly objectionable. And she kicked them to the curb. And the next statement was out of her mouth, after dismissing them, "I just can't meet people." So the idea is that this is a very typical situation, and it's very complicated. And people are very, very strange when it comes to these things, and these masochistic tendencies that I think everyone has to some degree or another, where they go through this in life and gets a deep amount of pleasure and sexual pleasure out of it as well, because the hemispheres of the brain which control sexuality and violence and negative behavior are right next to each other, which is why some of the best or most fulfilling sex tends to be things that tend to be of a more masochistic nature. So understanding all these things makes things complicated, especially when you go back and try and repair something or to change somebody within a relationship who came to you as this kind of bad boy negative person who you were masochistically attracted to, and then, well, I want to change this guy. Oh yeah? That's interesting. In most instances, unless these guys are complete con artists and have fed you a bunch of lies, generally they haven't. They're there, that's them, that's their attitude. They haven't promised you any deep love, or for that matter, even expressed deep love or commitments. They were good time Charlies, and I thought you understood that. Now you want me to act different because you are requiring, because that's going to meet a need in you? Well, that isn't my need. So this is very strange thinking. Of course, what's the answer? Magic. That's what everybody thinks. And of course, that's going to be able to be done because you, of course, seek a magical route. You hire somebody to do that. And of course, you're going to be able to change these people around, remold their personalities, and make them from nasty loser to Prince Charming. He's going to trade his stinky old mule in, take a shower and shave, and he's going to come back in a white suit on a white horse. Because you want it and use magic. Well, that's pretty delusional thinking to begin with. Now, if someone is feeding you that, you live in the world of Harry Potter and Hollywood movies, or some TV series that is twinking their nose, or reading a spell from a book that somehow is going to change people completely, then you have a problem of understanding the world, and you're going to be duped and taken by a lot of people. And it seems like that sells to a lot of idiots on the net who buy fairy rings and lust spirits for literally hundreds of dollars, or buy into reading books and other things that tell them nonsense that they will spend hundreds and even thousands on, which are nothing more than base level good luck charms with no empowerments in them whatsoever. So it's very interesting to see how people function. And I can certainly see how the con artists work, who constantly go out there and take money after money. And we've tested all these people who claim to bring back lost love. 2 hours. 2 hours. 2 days, maybe. Some of the ads say, whatever the time it is, guaranteed. They're going to just, the root men down south. Yeah, get them 2 roots and tie them together and put them in a red bag. And beep, beep, bang, bo. You two are together for life. You have to wonder why these aren't the most sought after people in the world and the most richest in the world. Because if you can manifest those kind of things, if you can change people, break their habits, completely change their personality, stop them from being sociopathic scum, stop them from being drug addicts, stop them from their negative and even criminal behavior, what would that be worth? There's certainly a lot of very dead children of million and billionaires and celebrities that I would think would pay quite highly for that kind of magical change. And after all, you have that power, you don't even have to charge for it up front. They'll just be off drugs tomorrow because I did it. Interesting. Well, that kind of fantasy understanding of life is quite amazing how many people buy into that. You know, you have these skeptics that don't believe anything. I don't believe water's wet. There's no proof in the scientific literature that tells me that water is wet. Basically, it's just two chemicals. I mean, these are the kind of idiots these skeptics are. Who, interestingly, the head skeptic seems to have been a radical, born-again Christian, possibly a Mormon, who now doesn't believe in anything, after preaching for 8 years on the streets. Wow. Or the magicians who are going to tell us, the illusionists, I should say, are going to tell us how nothing means anything. So, you know, you have it's amazing how there's this whole group of people like that think there is nothing there. And then there's those that think Harry Potter, yeah, I knew him. Yeah, I saw him fly around the room. Had this little stick he used to wave. It was quite amazing. I mean, it just amazes me. Now, as I've always said, magic is an amazing tool. It's, you know, people should fall to their knees and scream every time something magical happens, even the most tiniest, that something was produced from nothing. But you don't remold people. You don't change their entire aspect of their being. You don't take somebody who refuses to commit to you, who hasn't married anybody in 40 to 60 years, and then think they're going to marry you for some reason because you've hung around for a while. Well, there are a lot of serious problems with these whole things in general. And you know, one of the problems is that you establish yourself as the perpetual girlfriend. There's going to be a serious problem there. Now, this has happened with, and I love following these things. And who are you supposed to follow? People say, oh, talk about media people. Who else is there supposed to be? And these are public people. And the information I give you can basically be checked out to some degree, if needed, or this is how you learn what they're doing. And I've always found it fascinating following celebrities because basically they're just like you and me. And it's interesting to find out how other people operate. How are you going to do that? You're going to write about the guy who works at the bus station? Do we want to hear about his life? Do I want to know that he dresses like a girl at night? Not really. Kind of interesting if a celebrity does. So, it's very interesting how relationships are set up in a particular fashion. I've seen this by very different celebrities often, that they have a perpetual girlfriend, 5-10 years together, and they never marry. And usually that breaks up because of that factor, because the person refuses to commit. Yet, when the breakup does happen, that person who refused to commit for some of them as many as 10 to 15 years meets someone else, and within months, not only are they officially married, they're even having children. Because the girl they met demanded a certain relationship and did not want to become the perpetual girlfriend. And with most men, they're not really in a hurry. I mean, you can have babies until the day that you drop dead, basically, if you're a man. You could be 90, 98, 110, the oldest man is now. What is it, 112? He can have a baby tomorrow. 110 a woman couldn't. So there are problems with that. So there's a different urgency. So a guy having a good girlfriend that is around all the time and is a good sex buddy, Why not? Marriage ain't that all important. There's legal problems. They can get your money. You don't necessarily, men aren't all that driven to have babies. Not really that interesting. There's some guys want children. Most men don't. And after all, you can have a kid at 60. What's the rush? So, when you become the perpetual girlfriend, you are setting yourself up for all sorts of problems. And that's how you're seen, and you'll be seen like that to the day you die by that individual. This was proven in several celebrity cases. Simon Cowell, the famous guy from what's the show? Music show where they judge. It escapes my mind the most. I don't really watch that stuff. But the American show, America's Greatest Talent, or whatever it is, the singing show. He did that with his girlfriend, who was a reporter for 10 years. Jimmy Kimmel, the American talk show host, late night talk show host, had a famous comic girlfriend that he dated for many, many years. And then she talked about it on different shows of how he didn't really love her and wouldn't marry her. And it was true. But they were together for 5 or 10 years, whatever it was. She was there. She was a lay. That's how men think. Jenny McCartney. Most people would probably consider her a fantastic catch. Jim Carrey dated her for years and years. Maybe 10 years on and off or whatever it is. He even gave her autistic child, who I understand has been cured now since she went an alternative and was able to get the poisons out of the child that was injected to them by the psychotic medical facilities, otherwise known as Doctors of Doom. Actually gave the kid a 40, of course he has it, I guess, maybe it was a tax write-off, I'm sure it benefited him somehow, but gave a person he didn't want to marry $40 million trust fund for her child. But he wouldn't marry her. Now you figure that one out. I'm still reeling from that, but she, of course, broke up with him and married somebody very quickly afterwards. He has not. Being the kind of goofy guy he is, and apparently almost fanatically crazed religious Christian. But I guess having sex out of wedlock's okay. Usually is. So, and there's endless cases of these things I could bring up of different people that have had these kind of endless relationships. And it would have never changed that, because once you're the perpetual girlfriend, you're never going to be anything else. So let's say these perpetual girlfriends then decided to change these persons using magic. So what they want to do is completely change this person's personality and the way they've seen you for the last 10 years. And that's going to turn into some sort of magical revelation that these people are going to change the entire way they're being. Now, in these cases, there is some little hope of doing that, because you figure there is some deep caring there. There is no deep loving. People who are deeply in love don't date for 10 years. They don't tell you something if you're dating for more than 6 months, as far as I'm concerned. What's the point? You're supposed to date somebody to figure out if they are to be in a permanent relationship with you. Once you date past 6 months, what's the point? They're either right or not. If it's a fuck buddy relationship, that's another thing. And of course, everybody has to be in on that understanding. Which apparently doesn't seem to be. It seems to be only one direction in these so-called relationships. So, there's all kind of strange things, and there's all kinds of strange relationships that people have, and it's common for for certain successful women to seek out married men, and this is a common thing because of the less amount of entanglements. I mean, Jennifer Tilly in an interview stated that she likes married men because they don't show up like puppies on their door after having sex. After all, they have a wife to go home to, they have kids. They can't really play the dating game. And she doesn't really want a dating game. She obviously just wanted a fuck buddy. But I'm assuming that's a mutual agreement there. But the point is, somebody in a relationship like that could easily fall in love with the other, and then it shifts again. Then there's a problem. But it was established as not. It was established as a strictly sexual relationship, and the people involved didn't want a serious relationship. Now you want to change that and make it into a serious relationship. So you're changing the complete understanding and personality of that person. Then there are people that do this their entire lives. They're 40, 50, 60, they've never had any real relationships, or, it's typical that they get married young for a couple of years, and for whatever reason, and that's a common thing seeing with the guys in particular. And then they spend the rest of their life as some sort of player, manipulating women and never committing to them. And it becomes, for some people, it becomes a lifestyle, and they're good at it. They're able to pick up a particular type of woman, a woman who many times is either desperate or vulnerable, and they're able to basically just use them as fuck buddies, which the woman seems to be under the impression that this was some sort of more relationship than that, in most cases. And I'm sure it's the other way around too. But there wasn't. So the point is that you're going to go in and now you're going to use magic to totally change that person's personality from a virtual player, from someone who was never committed to anybody on any level, may have even had illegitimate children. And this is fairly common in these relationships as well. Because some women think they can trap a guy by having a baby with him. Well, there are some legal entanglements if you want to follow through on that, but generally you don't trap a man by getting pregnant, or not for very long. These people have a lifestyle, and their lifestyle is that they're not going to be with one person, regardless if there's a child involved, that they are out there as a player. That's what they do. And this is very common, and with the internet now, where people can spend hours and hours hunting up desperate and odd or strange people, this is very quite common. Or in the more old world, they're able to charm people somehow, and they have this way of somehow coming off as non-threatening and desirable to women, and they're able to do this. It's a type of charisma, but there's a different charisma of attracting people and having numerous different relationships, and making this a lifestyle with no intentions of meeting anybody serious at all. Which is the common way that 18 to 25-year-olds act, I guess. It's about having parties. You're not really looking to settle down with anybody. But generally, if you don't meet somebody from 18 to 25, you're going to have a hell of a time having a relationship, period. If you don't get married in college, you're in trouble. But here we get again into individual things of trying to change and mold people instead of starting from the beginning and drawing in the ideal people, getting rid of those that don't fit your ideal aspects. And of course, this is with magic. You're drawing in ideal people. Some of them are going to be good. Some of them are going to be bad. And then building from there instead of settling for what comes to you and then getting into with a problematic person and not rejecting them, staying with them and sacrificing yourself in some perverse, masochistic way to be with them. When there's 4 billion people of the opposite sex out there. And people have great difficulties establishing relationships and meeting people. Well, it's very, very interesting. And to a large extent, this has always been the case. And why in many societies they have arranged marriages. Because people don't do very good jobs of it on their own. So you might as well marry someone off to someone they have set up. Someone that is a family friend who you know are quality people, which then you can assume that their children are similar quality. And this can make life very simplistic, and believe it or not, that works a hell of a lot of the time. Because there is no special people out there. Everybody's the same to a large degree. So, what does that all mean? So there's this consistent need by a certain percentage of people that they want to use magic to change people's personalities. You cannot do that. You cannot make a person who doesn't want to marry, because that's their lifestyle. Not a person who's hesitant, not a love triangle where somebody, gee, I don't know, I'm interested in both of these girls. Now this is where magic can help you. You can go in there and say, well, I'm going to pull that guy towards me over the other person. But see, the person is willing to commit, he just doesn't know whom. If you have somebody who's 40 years old and doesn't want to commit, or even worse, 50, 60 years old, and hasn't been and doesn't want to commit, you're not going to change that person's personality. They see no value in doing that. If they wanted to and they loved you so much, this wouldn't even come up. It's abnormal not to be in a relationship. It's abnormal not to marry and have children. There's reasons for this. And spending your life in perpetual hunting for a mate is the most worthless thing you can possibly do. All cats are gray in the dark. So, it's very important to understand the bigger aspect of trying to remold people's personalities. And we can extrapolate on this not just in the love area. A person who's an abuser, who's mean, who's a drunk, an alcoholic, a drug addict, these people generally don't change. Now, some people can, and with guidance and love and therapy, they can break their nasty habits. They can move away from drug addictions, but it means they have an addictive personality. The person who's so into drugs or alcohol or whatever is also the person that probably can eat 14 bags of food in a sitting or gets caught up in something else. And people are easily addicted to everything. As a matter of fact, there's virtually nothing out there that people aren't addicted to. Collecting, the internet, religion. God, is there a bunch of people addicted to that so they can get into the high of the brain thing to live in a mythical land of God. So, it's human nature. And while you may be able to shift an addiction from alcohol to Jesus, or to collecting Beanie Babies maybe, that's always part of a person's personality. And you're certainly not going to change a person who's a player, often called, which is a variation of playboy, for modern times by the hip people. You're not going to change someone who's had a lifestyle of that and sees no value in changing. And for some reason you think these people love you and that your love is going to somehow change them. Now in these situations you try and amplify whatever feelings are there, and usually the feelings are so low that there's nothing to amplify. They don't care. They're players. They don't want you. You're a fuck buddy. That's it. Get it in your head. Accept it or move on. You're not going to take a personality like that and make somebody love you. And this is a very common problem with women. Men generally want someone who is so much in demand and so attractive that their chances of generally meeting someone like that is remote, and of course they want to try and grab that person. But if it becomes a fanatical thing where you're basically stalking somebody, you've got a problem. They don't want you. They're not interested in you. Changing that is virtually impossible. But it becomes even more impossible when you have a personality trait. And these people that go from one person to another have no love of anybody. It's a social thing. It's like going to a party every week. Who's the next girl? Who's the next guy? That kind of personality cannot be changed. If you get involved with a person like that, your chances of somehow pulling them in and controlling them is nil. Now, you can try many things, and of course, magic does not compel. It impels, it influences, and at times, for short periods of time, dominates. Sometimes you can dominate with magic, force a person to be with you for very short periods of time, and then they will soon, once the magic effects wear off, so to speak, they will soon be back to their old ways, and you'll be in this constant battle to try and keep them on the straight and narrow, and this leads into huge hatred and resentment without fail. But in general, these people are not going to be controlled, period, and you're not going to get what you want out of them. It doesn't work like that, and there's no way that magic can help you in situations like that. You can try it, and of course, it's always worse to try. It's always worse to see, is there really something within that person? Is there any real love there? And you try and amplify that when you go in and do rituals. You try and pull it towards the person. You isolate them, and this is very critical, is that you isolate these people from all the other people they're involved with. And by doing that, you push them towards you, which is the common tack to do in these types of situations. But what happens there? You isolate someone, you break up the relationship they're in with the whatever dalliance it is at that time, and what do you think they do the next week? They run to you? They've had you. They run to another dalliance. You break up one, they're involved with somebody else. So it's an endless stream, and of course, you can cause all sorts of relationship problems for them. You can keep breaking up their relationships. You can make sure that none of their other relationship works. But the fact is that, even if you do that, it doesn't mean that they run to you. And if they do run to you for short periods of time, they're still the same person. They're still going to be looking for others that they can have fun with because that's their lifestyle. That's them. They're able to do it. They have figured out a way to actually do it. That's their lifestyle. That's their personality. If it wasn't, you wouldn't even have to be bothered with that. But the fact that somebody doesn't kick you out of their bed, you don't take as a rejection enough that they don't want to be with you any other time, and they only want to spend an hour with you, and they don't take you to restaurants or dinner. They show up at your house, and you probably cook them a meal. Then it's doop-a-doop-doo, hi baby, that's great. See you whenever. See you when I see you. Well, that's a good candidate. I mean, that's the kind of guy every woman wants. What a pal. Show up when you feel like it, baby. I'll be here, waiting with a plate of food. Bring your car so I can wash it. And your clothes so I can wash them and iron them, and you can come and get them. I mean, it's amazing to me how certain groups of women allow themselves to masochistically be used by certain men that way. It's incredible. And unfortunately, I've seen way too much of it. So when you're dealing with relationships, the key to everything, just as is with money, is that you want to build the success of a business or whatever you're doing and keep those strong manifesting success fields around you. If you make a bad investment or your business goes bad and you keep pouring bad money into it, you're making a big mistake. And magic can't solve that. The whole idea is to keep things building and building and building, but also you have to understand if something doesn't work after a period of time, you need to move on. If you keep pouring good money after bad, there's something wrong with any investment. So you need to know when to get out of something before you get hurt, monetarily or in relationships. And magic is not going to fix somebody's personality. That's how they are. If you work on them for a period of time and you can't amplify their feelings of love and desire and you've tried to bind them, you've tried to bring them in, you've separated them from the other people, it is not meant to be. It's not there. And every time we've checked this, there is no love there at all. You are a companion at the best. So going from the perpetual girlfriend to the wife is extremely difficult. As I've already described and shown with these celebrity couples that had the similar thing, it never worked. They moved on and they got somebody else within months that they married and have children with, which the other ones were begging to do. And when you look at these things and you think someone you can mold their personality, another great example of someone who really believes they can do that and believes they're magical as well is good old Tom Cruise. Member of a radical and bizarre cult, the Scientologists, who seem to have horrible leadership. Scientology is interesting, and like most systems, even most religions, there are some interesting and good things about it. And they have a very magical viewpoint. After all, the founder of that was heavily involved in, well, of course, I guess we can figure, considering what happened, Crowleyite magic, and was a big follower of Crowley, and was involved in occult practices for many years. And a certain element of that, of Scientology, has a very magical and mystical aspect where they claim that once you go through to the higher levels that you will be magically empowered to a very strong level, virtually superhuman abilities, which has yet to be demonstrated by any Scientologist, but they are in some ways very mystical. They're also very fanatical and believe extremely strongly. I think Tom Cruise in particular, with his very forceful and fanatically dedication that he seems to approach everything at, certainly would think had the charisma, energy, and with a little technology behind him would be able to achieve great things. Not only in the motion picture business, but in life, which as basically his social life, as far as I can tell, has been a complete and total failure. He's never had a marriage or a relationship work out for him. One particular actress got him into Scientology, and she has since left, but showed him the way, but their relationship broke up, and at the time they were both Scientologists. Well, how does that work? I don't know, it seems to me. Which was Mimi Rogers. You know, from there, of course, we know the more public relationships he's had, particularly with Nicole Kidman, who he met on a movie set, who was extremely young, just getting into Hollywood. A very beautiful woman, and who appears to have a very hot crotch. And he thought he could grab this very naive Catholic girl and be able to mold her. into this perfect Scientology clone, of course, with him calling all the shots, I'm assuming. And you don't hear much about his personal life, and of course none of these ex-wives talk because they're under legal contract not to, and there's money on hand they will be penalized or sued or cut off from to do that. But they do, like most of these manipulative people, they stay with people, for the contractual time, usually 5 to 10 years, where they can cash in, have a couple of little rugrats, and they're set for the next 20 years. So in the meantime, they look around for other people, which generally they can find. So that was the case there. So this fanatical, powerful, super rich, and these very young and relatively, you would think, impressionable women could not be changed one iota. It appears that Nicole Kidman thought Scientology was just a load of crap. Now, these are all hearsay. I don't know 100. I'm using these as general examples. Whether these are exact facts or not, I don't know. This is what's gotten from the media. I'm using this as general examples. But we all know that that marriage didn't work out by someone who claims to have supernatural abilities, knows everything, control every situation, has been programmed to the utmost degree to make everything work. They feel they're as arrogant as the Navy SEALs, thinking they can do everything. They're the perfect people. Yet it didn't work for him. And the environment they were living in certainly wasn't what the average Scientologist lives in. Living in a giant mansion, being the cream of everything on the top, certainly didn't seem to have any effects whatsoever in that area. She did what like a lot of women do to rich guys and hang around for the contractual period of time and was not influenced by any of his obnoxious, high energy attitudes that he is well known for on every level of his life. And she even went through a Scientology brainwashing as well, through their little program of lie detectors and tell me your evil thoughts nonsense. Didn't work. So from there, he got somebody even younger and more naive. Yet came from a very upper middle class, if not semi-wealthy, Catholic-dominated family yet again. But I'm Tom Cruise. I can make it work. I know all. I be all. I got superpowers. Wrong, Tom. After staying the proverbial 5 to 7 years, whatever that was, having the little rugrat, was bye. Her last statement was, I'm safely and happily back in the arms of the Catholic Church. You better watch your kid, lady. So, what does that mean? So here's a person with huge amounts of financial, social pressures, because Tom's life is completely surrounded, from what I understand, by Scientology people, his staff, the people he's involved with, and rightfully so if you believe in something. But look at the immense social pressure, and even with all that, and even having young, semi-impressionable girls, obviously not impressionable girls at all, ultimately, he was unable to do that. Of course, he doesn't have real magic, and if he used the guild systems, maybe he would have been much more successful, at least to some degree, but you're not going to remold somebody's personality and make them into a psychic clone because you want to affect them through some spirit, magical ritual, or anything else. So, you can't remold people's personalities. If someone has a serious problem where they refuse to act in a proper way to you, and you think somehow there is love there, or they claim love, or whatever thing else, it is not there. It's a lie. But you're not going to change their personality. You're not going to take a person who has never committed into something that will commit. And you're not going to force somebody to think in a particular way that you're going to do it by the fact of using magic. It doesn't work like that. You impel, you dominate, and you plant these things in their subconscious that when openings and decisions are made, that they go in your favor. It's influencing. But you can't influence a bad person to be good. You can't influence a person who's not interested in relationships to have relationships. It doesn't work like that. If you have a bad relationship with somebody and you break up with them, you now have put within the energy field that you have with that other person all sorts of blockages and negativities and problems. So trying to reunite with somebody and overcoming those problems is difficult, but of course this is an area that is much more probable to happen. A lot of people get back together after breaking up. A lot of people tend to get married again. They're married once, they get married again, or some people even have relationships with each other after they're divorced. So it's very critical to actually understand that in the bigger picture. So that you know what you're dealing with. But if those people go on to meet other people, if they get involved with other people, you are running into problems again because they are now connected to other people. Why should they come back to you? They've already been with you and it didn't work. So in those cases, you have to make sure that you break up those relationships and draw the person back to you. But there's going to be natural problems there. There's going to be those blockages of the past that it already didn't work. What are we trying to do to start it again? But there's openings there. But again, the longer the time between this is, the more time that people get involved with other people. Why get involved with somebody you know didn't think that things didn't work when you can get involved with somebody that you don't have a past history for? So these all start the blockages and, of course, complicate the magical situation. If you were in a serious relationship, at least you know that there was some love there that you can amplify and work on to draw that person back to you. So those cases are much more probable to work out using magic and amplifying those energies, using the drawings to you, using different formulas that impel and influence people, and you're trying to dominate them for short periods of time so that you can get together and work out your problems. All these things, since you were together seriously in the past, means you have a much better chance to repeat those things. But you're not going to take a person who is one way and change them. So the problems you had in the past are going to rear their ugly head again, and you're going to have to deal with that because that person most likely hasn't changed from what they were before. I know very little people. I'm trying to think if I know any person that's actually changed from the first time I met them. I don't really know anybody that's changed. I meet people that I've known 10 years ago, meet them after 10 years later, and they're still the same kind of people having the same kind of problems because they've never changed their personality. But that's something for you to deal with, and that's basically beyond magic. The goal of magic was to get you gathered again so you can work out your problems, not to solve problems and change personalities, which can't be done. What you're trying to do when you try to have a person commit to you that refuses to commit is you're changing their personality, which is quite different. You can't do that. You can't make a good guy a bad guy or a bad guy a good guy by using magical influence. It doesn't work that way. You're influencing them to do specific things. You may be able to take a bad boss and influence him to make a few right decisions, but in the end, he's still the same jerk bad boss he was before. You're not going to change him into a good boss. You can influence him and the decisions he makes in certain areas, or even in lots of areas if you want to spend all your life doing that. Can be influenced. But you're not going to change his personality. So it's going to be an ongoing problem, and that's the way it's going to be. So it's very important when you get into these situations to understand what happens in these things and what the possibilities of manifesting relationships are, because these are very tough areas, and they mean a lot to people that are in these relationships. Their psychotic masochistic attitude of trying to get someone who doesn't love them, who doesn't want them, is these people are very distraught and distressed by the whole reality of that. And seem to base a lot of their existence on that, because they don't seem to have much of anything else in their life, or at least that particular area they masochistically want to desire instead of finding something better, because it's always better to stay with something old, stinky, and rotten than go to the unknown. Unknown is pretty much the scariest thing of all. I'm alone. It's better off I'm with this guy who beats me and treats me like shit. I'm not alone. So, the whole idea with all magic is to build brick by brick, stone by stone, a new structure. When that structure starts to rot, starts to become unstable, you need to break it down. You need to get rid of that old structure and start building a new one. Now, if you want to get something out of your system and say, well, I want to give this a try, that you certainly can do. And a lot of people need that. Well, I think that this person cares for me and something else. Well, go ahead. There are many formulas designed for these things. And it's worth a try. And if things work out, fantastic. And it's a good way to get it out of your system, to either prove that it can work or prove that it can't, dismiss it. But if you start spending your life involved with this very negative, masochistic way of functioning, it also affects pretty much all the rest of your areas of life. And it tends to get you very depressed. It gets you very sick. It starts to destroy your financial life. You get centered on these self-destructive attitudes. And it doesn't end in one area. It keeps going. So it's always better to build things up, and like everything else. And like everything in life, one of the hardest things to possibly do in life and situations is knowing when to bail, knowing when to stop empowering a failing business, when to stop empowering a failing relationship. These things are tough decisions to go through. It takes a lot of outside help in terms of finding an advisor who knows what's really best and can kind of give you an objective viewpoint. And measuring in your life in general, because it's always good to stay with something rotting and old. Even a dying business is better than no business, you think. Well, that's not true again. You need to let the dying die, and you need to move on to the living, so to speak. There are formulas to control infidelity, to keep men at home. And do these formulas work? Well, they do work, and they work for periods of time again. But a person who generally commits infidelity, it's a lifestyle. But, apparently, if you believe statistical data, almost everybody commits infidelity. 80 to 90% of those married claim that they've had extramarital affairs. Now, I'm not necessarily sure that that's necessarily wrong, because, it's where you put who's whose bed you put your shoes under at the end of the night that really matter. So I'm not sure that some sexual dalliance means much of anything in the bigger picture. But people who do this on a consistent basis, it's a lifestyle. You're not going to change it. And yes, you can have formulas to work on them to stop that, and that will stop some of them. But it'll stop them for short periods of time. You will constantly have to put these energies around them to break up and keep them from having affairs. It's a lifestyle. And when you get involved with people like that and it's something that you're not agreeable with, then there is a problem. If there's just some odd situation where there's a marriage, a long-term marriage, a committed relationship that someone is straying, someone is actually maybe thinking of leaving you or so forth, magic in those areas can work to bring them back into the relationship the way they should be and to reaffirm your relationship. You can do that with something that has a foundation to do it with, because they already have proven that they're people that wanted to be with you, that were committed. But when you get into this with people who are not committed, who really don't want to be with you, and it doesn't matter whether they've been with you for 10 years or not, they don't see it as nothing more than a casual relationship. Those kind of things is when it doesn't work. But if you're in a bad relationship trying to fix it, and I mean a marriage, sometimes that works. But it has to be mutual. And you can't expect, in this case, to dominate someone and tell them what's going to happen and expect them to treat you in a different way. If you aren't willing to work within the relationship as well, the magic isn't going to go in there and make them your slave again. We recently had this in several different cases we've had, is that people got into very bad marriages. And of course, what happens? The first thing that dies is sex. But while that sometimes dies for the woman, where she doesn't stray, even though oftentimes it does, it certainly doesn't die for the man. The man just finds partners elsewhere. When they've established themselves with someone else, and you are no longer their sexual partner, you don't give a shit for that woman as a male. You're not sexual with particularly a wife. You have no care for them whatsoever. Do you think you can reestablish that relationship without reestablishing a new understanding and have a new sexual relationship? No way in hell. The only reason that keeps even a man around is usually that there are children involved. And in these cases, that's as true as well. But a non-sexual woman, particularly a so-called wife, is not only disliked, they're despised. And quite frankly, rightfully so. That's not a marriage relationship. You're a housekeeper and probably overpaid. So if you expect to establish a positive relationship and you expect that man to start acting better towards you, that's going to have to also include and start with reestablishing a proper sexual relationship. Well, a lot of women want it the other way around. Well, it don't work the other way around like that. That's part of the reason why people get married. Not just to have hang a sign over their entranceway, I'm married. So, I mean, these are all the very complicated aspects in why relationships, of course, magic is needed the most, and why it is so difficult to make it work. But the whole idea is to keep your magic strong. If you think someone's weakening, if you're thinking they're starting to have wanting to have affairs, make sure you do something about it magically and as in a relationship. So you need to strengthen that marriage, putting those energies into it, using fidelity formulas, stay-at-home formulas, controlling formulas. You do it while there's still a possibility to do it, not once somebody's established a lifestyle or someone who has that lifestyle trying to change their lifestyle ain't going to work. Keeping somebody in line, yes. So you can see how things are very complicated. You also should be doing love bindings. If you're in a relationship with someone, you shouldn't just assume that that's going to continue into blissful joy for the rest of the relationship. As with money and other things, you need to protect your money. You need to build your investment. And the same thing with your relationship. You should be doing love bindings on a person who you are have a serious relationship with. You should be influencing them and making sure they stay loyal to you. And this happens with so many things in life, and is that people tend to get successful, and it's very typical in magic, and I've even done it myself, where you tend to be very successful in business or some areas, and you're so busy doing the business that you stop protecting it. You stop doing the success rituals because of the fact that you've already got enough. You don't really need much more success. But that never holds forever. You're always going to go through bad times, and these bad times can cripple or destroy something. Now, if you go in there and protect your relationship, you make sure you use formulas for fidelity on people before their infidelity strikes, you bind them to you, then you solve the bad marriage problem, which is pandemic. You're talking about 80% of the marriages fail. Seems to me you need a little insurance, and that ain't an insurance policy that you pay $25 a month to. That's a little magical insurance to make sure that everything goes. So this is the way of looking at things in terms of not trying to fix a bad marriage where somebody's cheated on you and now falls in love with somebody else because your marriage was so sick. The whole idea is to make sure your marriage doesn't get sick. The whole idea is don't stay with people that don't love and care about you. Move on. You're not going to change them. So it's an approach. And the point is, if you don't use the common sense of the world you're stuck in, you can't create a magical world where there's unicorns and pink bunnies and everything tastes sweet. It doesn't work like that. You need to protect these things. And you create your own reality, yes, but not a fantasy reality. You create your sorcerer's reality that you pull everybody into. And I've talked about that in another lecture. I don't want to repeat things here, but you pull them into your reality. But your reality can't be a false reality, a fantasy world that you built on unicorns and cupcakes. Things have to be understood in a proper fashion. And the illusions of life are just that. There's an old joke about the illusions of life. This guy died. He went to this grand palace. And there was nothing but beautiful girls, bottles of fine, fine wine everywhere, and nothing but the finest cars. Rolls Royces, Maseratis, Lamborghinis. And the guy says, I've died and went to heaven. This couldn't be any better. Yet he talked to the person there and he said, wow, aren't you having a ball here? Well, he said, things are not as they appear. The bottles are empty, the cars have no gas, and the girls have no holes. That's hell. So it's important to understand that these type of how to deal with things, particularly in relationships, which is the hardest area to get any kind of magical changes in people. Does magic work well in these areas? Yes, it does, to draw people in, to draw in the good people that don't turn into the crap. But if you let fate go in there and bring you your little bozo boy or girl that you meet in some bar or party or at some business like the geniuses do, that aren't meeting your expectations, and you haven't magically empowered to bring a good person to you, you're accepting what's brought to you, you're going to be in trouble. And if you do get something good, you don't go in there and protect it and enforce it, make sure that these things work in your life, you will fail again. That's the nature of relationships, and it's just written on every single wall you look at. Then you want to go in and change people who are virtually sociopathic in the way they work. Not virtually, they are. They don't care about anybody else, and they particularly don't care about you. Well, then why are they with me? Why do you think they're with you? Because they're getting something out of it. Usually it's pure sexual in nature, where you think it's not. Or they get something else off of you or from you, whatever that may be. So it's very important to understand that. It's a very difficult situation to, in any situation, to change something. If for one reason or another you're in a business that is failing because for one reason or another that product isn't needed. I mean, it's no longer applicable. The markets have changed. Doesn't matter how much you empower that. Sure, you'll make some extra money. Sure, you'll draw in all the customers you can for that particular reality there, but it will probably not enough to sustain you for any period of time. It's something that is dead. You have to learn to drop it and move on somewhere else. And that's difficult to do, particularly in relationships and businesses. But you have to face the fact that there are certain changes and shifts that happen, and if you don't change and shift with it, then you will be destroyed by it. You're going to go down with the ship. That's the same thing with a relationship. Maybe you didn't know this person was a sociopathic player. That can happen. People misrepresent themselves. After all, most of these guys tend to be quite charming or have something, or maybe they're rich, or whatever it is they able to pull on you. But that doesn't mean you stay in these relationships because somehow you feel attracted to it. Once you find out that there's something wrong here, it's either established that things have to change or you have to leave. Why are you wasting your time? You have a limited amount of hours on this planet. And people don't even understand. They talk about a lifetime. You don't have a lifetime. I don't know what that means. You know, let's say that it appears to be, of course, I think statistically it's 79 in the United States, the average age. Most people are living into their early 80s, middle 80s. So you have 80, let's say you have 80 years. Well, you can virtually do nothing until you're 20. Now you're down to 60 years of active life. And your last 20 years, I mean, generally from 60 to 80, how physically fit and wonderful are you going to be? Another 20 years. So you got 40 years of semi-productive realities. Because generally you don't reach any strides of success or anything else probably till you're 30 or 40 to begin with. So, I mean, when you start hacking these things off, you have productive years that you can do things or even have the smarts to do things, the ability and the knowledge could be as small as 20, 30 years. So, I mean, you shouldn't be trying to marry and get a problematic person into a serious relationship that's going to blow up like a bag of shit in your face. And then you're going to figure out, well, what magic can I use to get rid of all this stuff? Or you're just going to blow your fucking brains out because you're so damn depressed. I mean, these are serious issues, and they're affecting your entire life, and you got to know how to do this. So the whole idea is to build your bricks from the bottom up properly so you don't run into these problems. Make sure once you have that pyramid built that you maintain it. Make sure it's still working. If there's a crack somewhere, if there's something, if there's some problem, go in and fix that. Bolster it, shine it. Make sure that it continues to work and is pushed in the direction that it should be so that something doesn't happen. That's what living a magical life is all about. You're not depending on the fates. You're not depending on that person evolving and being good. You're making it happen to the highest possible level you can by empowering everything you do. Having a relationship is not about just having it. It's about empowering it and making it work. You wouldn't be trying to get back that lost love if you would have made sure that that relationship and that person in that relationship, when you were having problems with them, was controlled properly. And now a lot of people are fighting to get back past loves because they didn't do that. Well, that's kind of the hard way. The best way to survive cancer is not to get cancer to begin with. Don't do activities. Don't smoke cigarettes and then wonder why you die of lung cancer. Well, a good way to not die of lung cancer is to make sure you don't smoke cigarettes. Oh, is that too hard to understand? So this is a difficult area, but this is a big area in everybody's lives to some extent, and particularly in occultism, because a lot of people go into occultism or seek occult answers when it comes to these types of problems. And you've really got to know what the aspects are. And, we always, when we work with people, try not to psych them up of the possibilities of these things working. And, of course, in magic, anything could happen. But in general, you're not going to have magical success in the areas that I just talked about where you have to change someone because people don't change. Magic is not a God force that makes people act in a particular way. It influences them. It pushes. It dominates a little bit. It compels a little bit. And I hate to use that term because that's, of course, what everybody wants is the compelling aspect. But compelling doesn't mean lasting effects. It's more of a domination is a better way of phrasing it. It's a domination for a particular action for a particular period of time, which is usually very short. It does not change the person. So, forcing somebody to go out with you to a particular place that you think that is then going to change their personality because they're going to be with you and then you two are going to find themselves. Well, that's worth a try. But the bottom line, if they don't love and care about you, they never will. And if they're with you for periods of time, that doesn't prove anything. It means nothing. The only thing that counts is, what was the popular song? Put a ring on the finger. There has to be a commitment. There has to be a serious commitment. Or you're going to have to put up with the problems of those people. And if you want an open marriage, you want to be a swinger, or whatever it is that someone else may or may not be there, that is their lifestyle. And I don't think you necessarily have a right to tell that person they can't do that. That is their lifestyle, and you can't try and force your attitudes and belief on them. That's nonsense. You need to express what you desire out of a relationship and require that person to meet it, and if necessary, use magical force to push and cajole and even dominate to try and get that outcome. But when that doesn't work, you move on. After that, you're the problem, not them. Plain and simple, if you're doing something that is self-destructive and masochistic and you continue to beat a dead horse, as the old saying goes, if you really think that you can make pigs fly, you are the problem, not them. So with that, as always, there is no reality until the occult scientist creates it. Question everything, believe nothing, and let the guild be your guide.